Hi golfers, Nick here from Nick Taylor Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on golf tips, we're going to take a look at how you can take your golf swing out onto the golf course. So when you're practicing on the range, how do you take that out onto the golf course? So I have a lot of questions sometimes about, and you hear it from a lot of people, that are hitting the ball really well on the range, but not so good on the golf course. And I think there's a few reasons for that. First of all, there's not much pressure when you're practicing. When you're out in the range, it's the same lie all the time, you're standing in the same position, so there's a lot of consistencies which you get in a practice environment which you don't get out on the golf course. So I think that's part of the reason. Also, I think when people are on the range, a lot of the time there's no specific target they're hitting to. They may be feeling they're aiming towards a target in the distance, whether it's a flag or a range marker or whatever it is. They may feel like they're aiming towards that. There's no real pressure if they miss it. It's very different out on the course. Obviously, when you're out on the course, there's a target. So, for example, here we're out on the fairway here. I've got about 160 to the pin. You might be able to see the pin on the right side of the green here. But what I've done is set up my grid. And the reason I've set this up is just to explain to you that when I'm practicing, I will use the grid system. So I've talked about this in other videos, which I'll just briefly talk about here. So you've got the club path and the hand path, the swing centre. You've got the target line, which is the orange stick. So the grid is set up parallel to the target line with the ball back from the swing centre, 3 golf balls. So I've talked about this in a bit more detail before, so maybe check those videos out if you're not really aware of the grid in much detail. But how I use that when I'm practicing and on the course, I think is really important. This might be able to help you when you're taking your golf swing from the range out onto the golf course. So when I'm practicing on the range, I'll set up my grid and I'll practice mainly with the ball 3 balls back from the centre, which is like my standard golf shot, which I'll tend to hit on most shots when I'm out on the golf course. But I will experiment placing the ball in different positions, changing the handle height, changing the club face alignment, which I've talked about in other videos in a bit more detail. But I'll experiment when I'm out on the range using the grid system. So when I go out onto the golf course, when I set up to that golf ball, I don't just set up and see a golf ball with the grass around it. I set up and in my mind I see the golf ball and the grid. So when I take my alignment when I'm out on the golf course, so for example here I'm set up, you can see might be able to see the pin on the right there. What I'll do is I'll stand behind the golf ball, try and find my target line, which is the orange stick here. So I'll pick my target line in my mind, then when I go in to build my stance, I'll be picturing the grid in my mind. So I'm basically bringing like the target is the golf ball. Obviously the main target is the hole, but really the target is the golf ball. And when I set up to that golf ball, I don't just see a golf ball with grass around it, I see a golf ball with the grid in my mind built in. So when I'm hitting my shot out on the golf course, I will set up, I'll get my target line, the orange stick, build my grid in my mind, get the ball position where I want it to. Then what I'll do then is not actually look at the hole or the fairway or wherever I'm aiming at. I won't actually look at that once I've taken my stance, because in my mind I know I've set up correctly. And if I start looking in the distance, there's a few hazards here. There's a tree on the right, obviously, there's a couple of bunkers, there's a pond on the right, there's trees at the back of the green. And as soon as, if I set up to the golf ball and I start looking in that direction, my mind starts to wander and I'll start to think about the hazard or the bunker or something like that, when really I want to have a clear mind when I'm out on the golf course like I am on the range. I'm using the grid system on the range to practice. Then when I'm out on the course, I picture that in my mind on the ground and then I'll hit my shot. I won't start looking up towards the target. I know I've set up correctly and I will picture those lines for the club head and the hand path, and that just gets me focused. So basically the target is the golf ball, and when you set up to the golf ball, if you just see grass and then you start looking in the distance, your mind will start to wander. So when I set up to the golf ball, I see the grid and then I'll try and hit my shot, execute the shot as if I'm practicing on the range. So I've got my grid set up here. I'm going to hit a shot while we're here. Obviously I wouldn't do this in a normal situation with this out on the course, but I'm just going to hit one just so you can see. So left heel against the swing centre, ball back from the left shoulder. So this should draw. Got a bit of wind coming from the right here, So I'm just going to factor that in a little bit. So I'm just going to aim the face a little bit further right. Let's give it a go. Okay, pretty good. You saw that on the video there. That ball started at the pin and it just drew slightly just to sort of the middle of the green. So a pretty good golf shot. I'm basically taking the target into my own space and not letting my mind wander like it can do when you start to look up and start to see those hazards. So important when you practice, try and use the system like this and then try and picture that when you're out on the golf course, and hopefully you'll start to hit better golf shots. So golfers, if you've got any comments on that, post them in the box below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, and you can follow me on my other social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.